And I invite you to stand up for a moment of silent prayer. We'll begin the service today by singing hymn number 87. If we can sing first, second, and fourth. This morning is from Revelation chapter 3, verse 11, which says, "Behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast, that no man taketh thy crown." With these thoughts in mind, we'll have our opening prayer, and I invite Brother Jeff to lead us in prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you again for the Sabbath day and well for us. We pray for the sick and the ones that couldn't be here. Bless and help them. Also, Lord, we ask for hot coal off the altar to be with Sister Thomas she gets steady. And also help us, Lord, that we can have ears to hear as well. And forgive us our sins, and Lord, help us to see your love on this Sabbath day and help us to learn more about Jesus. In his precious name, amen.
Well, good morning and happy Sabbath to all of you and all of us. I don't know that we have any announcements to do, right? So we'll just go right into collecting our offering. Brother Jeff? Oh, yes. Yes. We will have week of prayer, and it starts this coming Friday, right? Yeah. And so we will meet at our house, and I guess at lunchtime we can decide what time is good for everybody to be there. But yeah, we will start a week of prayer. Is it members meeting on Sabbath too? That same Sabbath? Okay, so week of prayer, and then we have youth meeting, and then members meeting on Sabbath. All right, you guys know the announcements better than I do. Okay. And of course, the prayer meeting on Tuesdays, if anybody needs the link, you can touch bases with Brother Jordan, and he will let you know. All right. As you all know, I'm not a preacher. I think I say that every time I come here because I really am not a preacher. And whatever we're gonna be studying this morning, it's basically things that I have been thinking about. So we're gonna look at some verses of the Bible. The key text was, "Behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast, that no man taketh thy crown." As we are entering into December, it's the end of the year. And in the community, people that like to plan, they're already looking forward to 2023 and making plans for the new year. And people that like to set goals, they are already thinking about goals for the new year. And many people see that as a new beginning. Maybe you look at life 2022, not all of your goals were accomplished, and just a new year beginning is a new page, it's a blank book. You can start over. And so then there's another group that doesn't like to plan, don't think that that's something that we should be doing. We don't know how much time we have, right? Jesus is coming. He's coming quickly. He said so. And so sometimes we're like, well, I'm not going to make plans, or I'm not going to set goals, because who knows if we're going to have time enough to accomplish those things. And so I was thinking about that, and then I heard something. We don't know if we have tomorrow. But that doesn't mean that we don't plan, because without planning, then really, what would happen if we died today? What would be encrypted in our tombstone? What kind of person are we going to be if we don't have any plans, we don't do anything, because we are afraid that we don't have enough time to accomplish those plans? And so today we're going to be talking about a man in the Bible who, if there was a tombstone, the inscription on it would be wonderful. And it's something that I would like to have in mind if I get to that point, to have that same inscription. But we're going to start by reading Luke chapter 17, and the verse is 26. Luke chapter 17, verse 26 says, "As in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man." As in the days of Noah, it will be today. We believe that we're living in the last days, right? So then the description of what happened in the days of Noah is what we are looking around. We can see the same description. So verse 27 said, "They did eat, drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all." They were eating and drinking and getting married. Is there something wrong with that? Is there something wrong with us planning and having goals? So then why is it that this is the description that is put there? They were eating and drinking and getting married until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came. Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to look at details, because if we just leave it at that, we're going to think, well, then we need to stop eating and drinking and getting married. But that's not realistic, is it? So let's look at the details. We should not just stay in one verse. So let's go back to Genesis. Genesis chapter 6. Chapter 6, and we're going to start right there at the very first verse. Actually, no. Chapter 6, verse 8 and 9. In the middle of this, because we're said as in the days of Noah. So let's find out about Noah and who he was. It says in verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generation, and Noah walked with God. And verse 10 tells us what? And Noah begat 3 sons, which means that Noah got married, right? And he had sons. So, again, is there something wrong with eating and drinking and getting married? Even in this time that we're living. Obviously, no, because Noah was perfect. It says here he was a just man and perfect in his generation, and yet he got married and he had 3 sons. But if we begin reading from verse 1, we will find out a little bit more details that will give us an explanation of why the days of Noah are also the days that we're living in. It says here, and it came to pass, Genesis 6, verse 1, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with men, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So what do we notice in these verses happen here? Yes, the people of God saw the daughters of Cain, right? The daughters of Cain were beautiful. And in marriage, they mixed. We notice that in Genesis, right after Cain killed his brother, Genesis 4, what did he do? He left. He left his parents. He went to live in a different land. And through the spirit of prophecy, we know that the people of God lived separate. They did not mingle with the sons and daughters of Cain for a long period. But here in chapter 6, we see that now in marriage they were mixing together. And what did that do to the Lord? It grieved him. And what was the first thing that he did, that God did in his sadness?
Decrease the years of life.
Yes, he decreased the years of life. They were no longer going to be living 800, 900 years. They were going to live only 120 years. So let's continue and look at a little more details. And I've been reading the book Conflict. That's what it's called. And wow, that book is really beautiful. Confrontation is. I would encourage the church to just read it together because there's so much in there that we could talk about. It's such a beautiful book. But here we're going to look at what it meant for them to mix. The people of God had remained separate, and because they were still serving God, God had preserved in them the likeness to Him. As we get closer to God, we become like Him. And so they were close to God, and they had preserved their likeness to God. Their physical strength was also preserved. They were vegetarians. While we also find out that the people here were already eating meat. And so there was physical strength that they had. Now they mix together. And what is the result of that mixture between godly people and worldly people? Let's see what happened. Verse 4. And there were giants in the earth in those days, also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, that they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of men was great in the earth, and that every imagination of their thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So now they mix together and they put their physical strength, the wisdom that God had given them, to good use. Is that what it said? No. Their thoughts, their imagination. Imagination is something that God has given us. It's something he created so that we could invent things. God gave us the power to invent things, but he wanted it to be used for good. And now this is destroyed, and they start using it for wrong. You see, in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 3 and 4, we're told that when Christians marry non-Christian, it's not that the non-Christian is going to become Christian. What happens 99% of the time is that the Christian becomes unchristian. So this is what is the result of mixing. And that is why, what does it say? As in the days of Noah, so shall it be in this time. We're going to be seeing a mixing of Christians with non-Christians in marriage. And I think we see that already. And what is that going to lead? It led to the flood. And another thing is in their diet. So it specifically says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men. Who cooks in the house? Usually, right? We're not going to make a generalization, but usually it's the woman, and especially in those times. And what were they cooking? Yeah, what they had grown up cooking, right? So, in that book, Confrontation, it talks a lot about appetite. How did we come to be where we are? Because Eve could not control her appetite. She ate of the fruit. She wanted something different. And that is the first temptation that Jesus had to go through was appetite. And he did it after fasting 40 days. It says that he had pains of hunger. Not like Moses. Moses fasted 40 days, but God provided him strength, and he was not hungry. But Jesus was hungry, and he had to go through that test to show us that we have to control our appetite. When man did not control his appetite, they became what? They became violent. Whatever they wanted, they had to have it. This is the state of the days of Noah. And that's what we're starting to live or see around us also. There's a Bible commentary here that says, had man cooperated with God, there would have been no Cain worshippers. Abel, example of obedience, would have been followed. Men might have worked out the will of God. They might have obeyed his law, and in obedience they would have found salvation. God and the heavenly universe would have helped them to retain the divine likeness. Longevity would have been preserved, and God would have delighted in the work of his hand. So the state of the world just before Noah was not something that was necessary. Even before its sin, what I gather from here is that even after Adam and Eve sinned, they didn't have to continue to sin. Mankind didn't have to go down. They could have retained a closer likeness to God if they had just remained faithful. And the children of God that came and married this women of the world, they had the knowledge of the truth. So we're not talking about people that didn't know and many years had passed and they just, no. The knowledge of God was still fresh in their mind. We also know that the Garden of Eden was still on this earth. And so they had a physical reminder of what it was before. There was no reason for this situation to come to that. Now, in the book Confrontation, it says that Jesus came. By the time that Jesus came, men had fallen even lower than this. Their physical strength had diminished so much. And the likeness to God was almost completely erased. That's when Jesus came, to show that it's possible. And as we get closer to God, then this Bible commentary also, it's a promise. As we get closer to God, we will become like him. We can become like him again. It also comments here that the times of Noah, they were actively trying to erase any thought of God, any memory of him, they just wanted to erase anything about God. So actively they tried. Why? So that they could please themselves and do whatever they wanted with no thought, no conscience anymore to bother them. And so as we think about our lesson, stewards, it has so much to do with us and pleasing ourselves, doesn't it? We have to stop pleasing ourselves in order to be generous, in order to do what is right. They were living to eat and drink, not drinking and eating to live. That was their pleasure. They invented things to make life easier so that they would have time to please themselves. Isn't that similar to what we're living today? I mean, how many things do we have that make our life easier so that we have time not to help others, not to study the Word of God, but to please ourselves? They married for gratification of passion. And so they became violent. If they saw a woman that they wanted and she belonged to somebody else, they killed that person so that they could have what they had. If they saw a house, it also mentions that they competed against each other. Their houses had to be one more beautiful than the other. We imagine sometimes, and that's Satan's work, to imagine that these people were cavemen. But they weren't. They had beautiful homes. Homes that we can't imagine. Decorated with gold and silver and emeralds and pearls and everything that God had left there they use it for what? To compete against each other. A home had to be better than our neighbor. Do we see that today? Absolutely. This is the time that is talking about here. And all of this falls under appetite. The gratification of appetite. The gratification of what I want. It's not just about food. It's about a lot more than that. And so their imagination became corrupt. And God was taken out of their mind. I want to read here in Great Controversy, page 338, paragraph 2. It says, when the professed people of God are uniting with the world, living as they live, and joining with them in forbidden pleasures, when the luxury of the world becomes the luxury of the church, and maybe we're thinking, but we're poor, we don't have luxury. Yes, we do. Maybe it's not gold and silver, but we have luxuries. And we compete and we are trying to be like the world. When the marriage bells are chiming and all are looking forward to many years of worldly prosperity, then suddenly, as the lightning flashes from the heavens, will come the end of their bright visions and delusive hopes. And in the middle of all this, in the middle of a world that's living to erase the memory of God, who do we find? But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. But Noah was perfect in his generation. And Noah walked with God. Chapter 7, verse 5 says a little more about Noah. How was he able to be perfect? He did everything according to all that the Lord had commanded him. This morning when we were talking about the lesson, how important it is for us to know the details of what God commands us to do. Because if we don't do it according to what he asked, we are not going to be blessed. It says that Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him. Just a thought. Do you think Noah knew what the flood was? He hadn't seen it either. Not like everybody else in his time. They had never seen rainfall. So when the Lord said, build an ark because the flood is coming, it's not, most of it he did by faith. Because he had been walking with God. He had been doing everything that the Lord commanded him. And so when that command came, it wasn't like strange. I'll just continue to do what God has told me to do. And I'm sure that to build an ark, he had to plan. He had to have certain goals that he wanted to accomplish as he's working through this to get done. Right? He worked on the ark for how many years? 150 years. He worked, he planned, he lived, he ate, he drank, he had children. He lived a normal life, but he did it according to what God commanded. God was the center of his life, of his thoughts and his imagination. That's the difference between the two, between the other people and Noah. As we get closer to this year, to the end of this year, I was reminded that it's only Well, actually, let me put the question to you. Do you remember when the pandemic started? March of 2020. It's becoming a memory, and it's fading. You know, I remember when it started and everything shut down in March of 2020. Our thoughts were, Jesus is coming. He's closer than we thought it was going to be. Our reaction was almost like a knee-jerk reaction. Hey, Jesus is coming. But 2 years have gone, 2+ years have gone by, and that memory is that reaction of that moment, it's fading. And we're kind of becoming accustomed to the way things are now, the way we work, and the places that we have to wear a mask still, and the places that we don't, and the economy and everything. We become accustomed. To the people of the time of Noah, 150 years, he not only worked on the building of the ark, but he also had a message. And if we read in the Bible commentary, I found this very interesting and new. I was reading, it says, for that time, Christ was engaged in this warfare in Noah's day. So Jesus was directly involved in that time of Noah. It was his voice that spoke in the inhabitants of the old world in message of warning, reproof, and invitation. So together with Noah, Christ was also there sharing the message, an invitation for the people to repent so that they would be saved. He gave the people a probation of 120 years in which they might have repented, but they chose the deceptions of Satan and perished in the waters of the flood. A message was sent from heaven to the world in Noah's day, and their salvation depended upon the manner in which they treated that message. We have a message for today too. In John chapter 14, verse 1 through 3, let's read that. What did Jesus tell us? John chapter 14. Jesus begins by saying, "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions, and if it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also." The message is that Jesus is coming. Behold, I come quickly. How we receive this message, our life depends on it. I've been very touched by the lessons, the Sabbath school lessons. Every time I read it, it's almost like, listen, it's a correction personally for me. Not just about money, but how am I steward of everything? Because as we read today, everything we have is God's, even our body. How am I a steward of my body? And so, how are we receiving the message? Do we just listen and nod our heads, and then we get up from church and we continue to do as we did before? If we do that, are we going to be saved? You know, many people in the time of Noah, they believed. As he began to preach, they believed. But it says here in the commentary, those who believed when Noah began to build the ark lost their faith. How? Through association with unbelievers. Why? Because they arouse in them the old passion for amusement and display. We live in this world, and we know things are not good. And we are in the middle of everybody else. But we need to live like Noah. And we need to keep some sort of separation from the world, because otherwise we will lose our faith. Mingling with them, old passions for amusement and display will be aroused again. What are we feeding? How are we listening to the messages that we have? So many beautiful messages. How much do we really love God? And how willing are we to do as He commanded? Is our God our appetite, our self, our desires, our wants? It doesn't have to be food. I have wants that are not sin. But if I let it be my most important want, to the point that I'm putting all my energies into it, all my resources into it, they become sin. John chapter 14, verse 22 says, let me find it here. John chapter 14, verse 22. Oh, Jesus, in this chapter, Jesus continues to talk about, His coming and how He was going to be separated from the disciples. But if they loved Him and kept His commandment, then He would continue to reveal Himself to them, and the Father also will reveal Himself to them. And Judas said unto Him, not Iscariot, Lord, how is it that Thou wilt manifest Thyself unto us, and not unto the world? And Jesus answered and said unto him, if a man loves me, he will keep my words, and my Father will love him, and we will come unto him and make our abode with him. So if we love the Lord, He will continue to show Himself to us. And that, as we said before, by beholding, we become changed. We want to become like we were created in the image of God. The world is coming back to the point of losing that image of God. But we can have that image restored in us. But we have to love Him, and we have to do what He tells us to do. If we love Him, we will keep His commandment. So how are we going to live the rest of this year? How are we going to live the time that God grants us? What would be, if I died tomorrow, what would be engraved in my tombstone? What would people remember about me? Of Noah, we know that he did all that God commanded him. Something I was listening to said, if Mrs. Noah had to inscript something, I think she would put that in his tombstone. He did everything that God commanded. I mean, she had to go with him in the ark, probably didn't understand everything that was going on, but she followed him. And she saw how he did it. He did all that God commanded him. But would that be the same for us? Can other people say that we are doing everything that God commanded? And in closing, I would like to read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 10. I I always have a problem finding this book. Okay. Chapter 2, verse 10, 2 Thessalonians. It says, and here it's talking about those that will perish and the message that we are receiving. They received not the love of the truth that they might be saved. For this cause God shall send them strong delusions that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So we know that there is a choice to be made. There is a group that will believe and those that will not believe. We saw how the children of God mixed with the world, and they chose not to believe. They chose to erase all memory of God. How are we going to react? If we choose to not believe, then God will let us not believe. And it will send other things for us to believe. It will be delusions. But we can also be like Joshua, right? What did Joshua say? Choose you this day who you will follow. Joshua 24, 14 and 15. So we have a choice. And it is my desire and prayer that we will choose to follow the Lord. That all of Buckley Church, my dear brothers and sisters, and myself, will be together in heaven. So if that is our choice, then we will sing very happy, sing number 358.
Dear Heavenly Father, we still in thy presence, Lord, to give thanks for the blessings and also for this message. Help us, Lord, not to be among those that reject the message, but the ones that we accept and we go into there when you come, Lord. Help us also to give a good example for people around us, and also be with the ones that are not here present, and also for the one that requests prayer for that will extracurricular. We will forgive our sins in the name of Jesus. Amen.
All right, we are dismissed. May God be with each of us as we go from this place and bless the rest of the Sabbath day.
That's okay. No, you're good.